My daughter abandoned me in my darkest hour while I fought cancer alone. 2 years later, she came back thinking I was gone, only to find me standing at the door. I never imagined that the hardest part of battling cancer wouldn't be the chemo, the pain, or the fear of dying. It would be my own daughter walking out on me when I needed her most. I never thought life could flip so violently with just a few words. "Mr. Bennett, I'm sorry, it's stage 2 pancreatic cancer." I remember sitting there numb in that cold, sterile doctor's office. The world buzzed around me, but I couldn't hear anything, just that one sentence echoing in my mind. I'm Benjamin Bennett, 56 years old. A simple man, really. Worked as a civil engineer my entire life. Took pride in building homes that would outlast me. I always thought my life was pretty straightforward. Work hard, raise my daughter, and hopefully in my golden years, do a little fishing on a quiet lake somewhere. But life had other plans. I raised my daughter Mary on my own after her mother left when she was just 8. My ex-wife Dana packed her bags one autumn evening and left for a new life, with a new man, in Chicago. No shouting, no messy divorce. She just left. Mary stayed with me. We built a life together, just the two of us. Birthdays, school plays, weekend hikes. It was always Mary and me. She was my entire world, and I did everything I could to make up for the absence her mother created. But raising Mary wasn't always easy. She was a sensitive kid, deeply scarred by her mother's departure, resentful, angry. She struggled through her teenage years, getting into fights at school, shutting herself off from therapy sessions I begged her to attend. But I stood by her. Through every slammed door, every tearful breakdown, I was there. By the time she turned 22, I thought we were finally in a good place. She wasn't perfect, dropped out of college after her sophomore year, bounced from one dead-end job to another. But she was kind-hearted, funny, and for all our ups and downs, she was my daughter, my only family. When I came home after the doctor's appointment, Mary was in the kitchen scrolling through her phone, absent-mindedly stirring a pot of spaghetti. "Dad, you're home early. How'd the checkup go?" I could barely get the words out. "It's cancer, sweetheart. Stage 2. The phone clattered onto the counter, her face drained of color. "Oh my God, Dad!" She rushed to me, hugging me tighter than she had in years. "We'll fight this. I'll be here. You're not going through this alone." We both cried that night. Real, gut-wrenching tears. She promised me she'd be there. Through chemo, through the surgeries, through it all. For a while she was. The first few months were hard. Chemo's no joke. The nausea, the bone-deep exhaustion, I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. Mary took me to my appointments, made me soup, binge-watched old westerns with me when I was too weak to move. I'd catch her crying in the kitchen sometimes, thinking I couldn't hear. But then she changed. The 4th month into treatment, I noticed it. The coldness. It started small. She'd come home later, spent more time locked in her room, barely spoke during dinner. Her patience thinned, her kindness cracked. When I asked her to grab my meds from the pharmacy one night, she let out an exaggerated sigh and muttered, "You can't do anything on your own anymore, can you?" That one stung. I tried to ignore it, told myself she was overwhelmed, that it was hard watching someone waste away. But the distance grew. Then one afternoon, after a particularly brutal chemo session, I found her stuffing clothes into a duffel bag in the living room. "Mary, what's going on?" My voice barely rose above a whisper, my throat still raw from the treatment. She didn't even look at me. "I can't do this anymore, Dad. I'm drowning here." I hired the nurse you asked for. You barely have to do anything now." "It's not enough," she snapped, finally turning toward me. "I feel trapped in this house, taking care of a dying man who can't even stand up by himself. I can't watch this anymore." "I'm your father, Mary," I whispered, feeling something inside me break. "I was there for you when no one else was. I never left you. And now you're walking away when I need you most?" She hesitated. For a split second, I saw the little girl I once carried on my shoulders, the one who used to beg me to read her bedtime stories twice, sometimes 3 times in a row. But then, her jaw clenched. I didn't sign up for this. And she left. I sat there, in my cold, empty living room, chemo drip still attached, staring at the door she just slammed shut. Alone. For weeks after, I barely ate. The nurse did her best, a sweet woman named Kathy, but nothing filled the hole Mary had left. Nights were the worst. I'd sit awake, wondering what I did wrong. Was I too strict, too soft? Did I push her too hard or not enough? Every time my phone buzzed, I prayed it was her. It never was. But the worst was yet to come. The weeks after Mary left were the longest of my life. The house felt like a hollow shell, empty coffee mugs left untouched on the counter, her worn-out sneakers still by the door, and the eerie silence that crawled into every corner of the house. It wasn't just the loneliness, it was the betrayal, sharp and relentless. The nurse, Kathy, became my only anchor. She came daily, made sure I took my meds, kept the house livable, and even tried to pull me into conversation. But I saw it in her eyes. Pity, the kind that burrows deep, even when they try to hide it. "Benjamin, you need to eat more than toast," she'd say, her voice soft, placing a plate in front of me. I'd give a weak smile, but the truth? I didn't care. I was done fighting. Not the cancer, but the silence Mary had left behind. I still checked my phone, every single day, hoping nothing. Until one rainy Tuesday, when life, once again, threw a curveball. Kathy had gone home early that day, and I sat by the window nursing a cup of tea that had long gone cold. The steady patter of rain was the only sound until bang, 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 a knock at the door, loud and hurried. My heart raced as I wheeled myself to the door, the thought flashing, Mary? But it wasn't her. It was Dana, my ex-wife. She stood there, drenched in rain, an umbrella barely shielding her. "Dana?" My voice cracked with shock. "Ben, I heard about the cancer and about Mary leaving." I didn't know whether to slam the door or pull her inside. "Why now, Dana?" I managed to say. She hesitated. "Because our daughter is spiraling, Ben. She came to me last week. She's in bad shape." The floor seemed to fall beneath me. "Mary, you've seen her?" My voice trembled, that small flicker of hope reigniting. Dana nodded. She showed up out of the blue, said she didn't know where else to go. She's angry, confused. She thinks you've moved on from her. Moved on? The very idea felt like a cruel joke. I sighed deeply, the anger, hurt, and love for my daughter swirling together. "She left me when I needed her the most, Dana. And now she thinks you're gone." Dana's voice softened. "She thinks you didn't make it." My hands clenched the armrest of my wheelchair. She didn't even check. Because she was scared to find out the answer. That hit deeper than I wanted it to. Dana left shortly after, leaving a folded piece of paper in my hand. Mary's new phone number. I stared at it for hours, debating whether to call, but I didn't. Not yet. Days passed. Until one evening as I sat by the fireplace, Kathy handed me a letter. No return address. Just one word scribbled on the front. Dad. I opened it with shaky hands. "I don't know if you're even alive reading this, but if you are, I'm sorry. I panicked. I ran, like Mom did, and I hated her for it, and now I hate myself. If you can ever forgive me, I'll be at the old fishing spot. Saturday, noon." My chest tightened. I didn't know what to feel. Hope? Fear? Rage? But I knew one thing, I had to go. Saturday came faster than I expected. The morning sun cut through the clouds, and for the first time in months I felt something stir inside me. Nerves, maybe, or hope. I wasn't sure. I sat in the car, parked a few feet away from the old fishing spot, the one Mary and I used to visit when she was little. It was still the same, the cracked wooden pier, the tall reeds swaying in the breeze, and the same lake where we'd sit for hours, barely catching anything, but laughing the entire time. Only today, I wasn't laughing. Mary sat at the edge of the pier, her legs dangling over the water, staring at the ripples. Her shoulders were hunched, her hands twisted together in her lap. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to drive away, avoid the pain, avoid the confrontation. But then she turned her head slightly, and I caught a glimpse of her. Thinner than I remembered, dark circles under her eyes, and for a second, she wasn't a 22-year-old woman who had abandoned me. She was my little girl again. I got out of the car. The wooden boards creaked under my weight as I approached, my footsteps heavy. She didn't turn around until I was right behind her. When she did, her eyes widened, pure shock flickering across her face. "Dad?" Her voice cracked, barely above a whisper. "Still alive," I muttered, my throat thick. She scrambled to her feet, nearly slipping on the damp wood. I thought you thought I was dead?" I cut in, harsher than I intended. Her face crumpled. "I did. I didn't check. I was scared and selfish. I thought I was going to come back and," she hesitated, "inherit everything. And I hate that I thought that way." The brutal honesty knocked the air out of me. "You wanted me dead so you wouldn't have to face me?" I asked, a bitter laugh slipping out. She flinched. "No, I thought I'd missed my chance. And when I found out you were alive, I panicked." The wind picked up, carrying the smell of the lake. It was the same place where I'd once taught her to fish, how to tie a knot, how to skim stones across the water. "You left me, Mary, when I needed you the most." My voice cracked despite myself. Tears streamed down her face now. I know, Dad, I know, and I hate myself for it. I thought I was strong enough, but I wasn't. I crumbled, and then I ran, like Mom did, and I swore I'd never be like her. Silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. Why now? I finally asked. Why come back at all? She hesitated, wiping her sleeve across her face. Because I realized I was about to lose you. Forever. And I couldn't live with that. I didn't want the last thing between us to be me slamming the door in your face. I sat down slowly on the edge of the pier, my legs stiff. She sat next to me, cautiously, leaving a small gap. You broke my heart, Mary, I whispered. She nodded, tears still falling. But you're still my daughter. Her breath hitched, a soft, broken sound. Does that mean? It means I'm not ready to forgive you yet. I looked at her, really looked. But I'm willing to try. She collapsed into me, her arms wrapping tight around my shoulders, sobbing. I let her. I cried too. The pier was quiet except for the wind and the sound of the water lapping against the posts. It wasn't easy after that. Mary didn't magically turn into the perfect daughter, and I didn't forget the months of silence. But we talked, really talked, for the first time in years. She started coming over more often, though it was awkward at first. Sometimes she'd sit on the porch while I read my book, both of us stealing glances at each other, unsure of what to say. Other days she'd bring takeout, usually from that old burger place we used to love, and we'd pick at our fries while talking about nothing in particular. But slowly the conversations grew deeper. The silences weren't heavy anymore. They were comfortable. I was still rebuilding myself too, physically, emotionally, and part of that was letting new people into my life. That's how I met Sierra. It was the most random encounter, at the local farmer's market of all places. I was reaching for a jar of peach preserves when another hand beat me to it. Oh, sorry, go ahead, I mumbled, but she just smiled and offered me the jar. Peach is my favorite, but you looked like you needed it more, she chuckled. We ended up chatting for over an hour, right there between the homemade jams and the honey stands. Syra was in her early 50s, a painter who lived a few towns over. She was easy to talk to, witty, sharp, but with this gentleness that cut through my usual defenses. Our first date was simple. Coffee and a walk through the park. No pressure, no awkwardness. We both knew what life had already thrown at us. She was divorced too, had raised her daughter on her own, and like me, she was learning to build something new out of the scraps. It felt easy. For months, Sierra and I grew closer. She brought color back into my world. Literally. She painted landscapes, sunrises, stormy skies. Her whole house was filled with canvases. She even got me back into fishing, something I hadn't done since Mary was a kid. The first time I mentioned Syra to Mary, I could see her tense up. You're dating? She asked, eyebrows raised. Yeah, is that a problem? I braced myself for her reaction. She hesitated, then shook her head. No, I guess I didn't expect it, but that's good. I want you to be happy, Dad. A beat passed before she added, Can I meet her? That was a tricky dinner. Mary sat stiffly across from Sierra at the kitchen table, picking at her salad while Syra did her best to bridge the gap. It wasn't until dessert, Sierra's homemade peach cobbler, that Mary finally cracked a smile. This is actually really good, Mary admitted, a bit surprised. Syra laughed. I make a mean cobbler. It's how I bribe people into liking me, Mary snorted, and just like that, the ice broke. Over the next few months, they got along surprisingly well. Syra didn't try to play stepmom, and Mary seemed to appreciate that. Sometimes, Mary would even call Syra directly, asking about recipes, painting tips, and though she tried to play it cool, I knew it meant something. One evening, Mary and I sat on the porch, watching the sunset bleed orange and pink across the sky. She was sipping a soda, her feet tucked under her, the air filled with the sound of cicadas. Dad, she began, do you ever regret all of it? Raising me alone? Putting up with everything? I set my book down, surprised by the question. Every damn day, I said, deadpan. She gasped until I smiled and she swatted my arm. Seriously, Dad? I sighed, letting the moment stretch before answering. No, I don't. It wasn't easy. God knows that. But I don't regret it, even when you stormed out, even when you didn't come back, because I learned something. About me, about you, and about how messy love can be. She bit her lip. I still feel like I failed you. You did, I said honestly, but you're here now, and you're trying. That counts for something. She nodded, tears welling up, but she quickly blinked them away. A year later, things had shifted more than I ever expected. I sold the old house, too many memories in those walls, and bought a smaller place closer to Syra. Mary helped me move. She even painted the living room with me, though halfway through she accidentally splattered paint on my jeans, leading to a 2-hour paint war. Mary found her own path, too. She got a part-time job at a local animal shelter, something she always talked about doing but never had the courage to try. It wasn't much money, but it made her happy. And to my surprise, she signed up for community college again, part-time this time, with no pressure. "I'm not doing it for anyone but me this time," she said. I could have burst with pride. As for Syra and me, we're not talking wedding bells or anything. At our age, there's no rush. We enjoy what we have. Quiet mornings drinking coffee, afternoons fishing at the lake, nights watching old black and white movies she swears are cinematic masterpieces. Mary and I still have our moments. Old wounds don't vanish overnight. There are days when she's distant or I get too gruff. But now we talk it through, and I've learned something important. Sometimes forgiveness isn't about wiping the slate clean. It's about choosing to keep showing up, even when it hurts. I never thought I'd get to this place, cancer-free, in love again, and rebuilding my bond with my daughter. There were times when I thought it was all over, but life, as it turns out, had a few more chapters left for me. So here I am, older, a little more beat up, but still standing. And for the first time in a long time, I'm really, truly happy. Would you have given Mary a second chance? Was Benjamin too forgiving? Can trust ever fully heal after deep betrayal? Share your thoughts in the comments, like if you believe family deserves second chances.